The galaxy was filled with countless dangers. Warships as big as planets roamed the stars, and armies that could wipe out entire civilizations were led by ruthless generals. But even among all this, there was one name that sent chills down the spines of every being in the galaxy: Vrax, the Galactic Warlord. Vrax was not just another military leader. He was a legend, feared by all. His victories were so many that they became tales told in every corner of the galaxy. He had led countless battles, always emerging victorious, always stronger than his enemies. To challenge him was unheard of. To defeat him, impossible. The tyrant's shadow, Vrax's warship, moved silently through the cold void of space. It was massive, its sleek black form cutting through the stars like a shadow stalking its prey. Its engines roared with power as it entered the human sector, its arrival sending ripples of fear across the system. Vrax had come to prove a point. He had heard rumors of the humans, of their growing strength, their ability to resist the might of other empires. He had heard whispers of their resilience, their courage. But Vrax didn't believe the stories. Humans, in his eyes, were weak. They were nothing compared to the alien species that had fought beside him and had fallen before his might. But these rumors were growing louder, and Vrax wasn't one to back down from a challenge. He decided to test this rumor. He sent a message across the human colonies, broadcasted to every corner of their worlds. The challenge was simple. He would face any human soldier in combat, and the result would show the galaxy once and for all just how weak humans truly were. His message echoed through the human networks. I challenge any human to face me in battle. I will show you the true power of the galaxy's might. If you dare, come and face me. Across the galaxy, the humans trembled. The announcement spread like wildfire. Their leaders were torn. Most saw it as a death sentence. Vrax was too powerful. No human stood a chance against him. But some, deep inside, saw this as an opportunity to prove something. A chance to show the galaxy that humanity was more than just a footnote in history. They were something more. Jason was one of the many who heard the broadcast. A young cadet, fresh from the military academy. He had been training for years, dreaming of a moment like this, but he had never thought it would come so soon. He sat in the corner of the small, dimly lit mess hall, surrounded by his fellow cadets. They were all whispering, sharing their doubts, their fears. Are they insane? One of them said, Vrax is a god of war. No human has ever stood a chance against him. I know, another cadet replied, but you have to admit, it's tempting. If one of us could actually defeat him. Jason could hear the uncertainty in their voices. He could feel the fear in the air. Everyone was too afraid to even consider taking on a warlord like Vrax. But for Jason, this fear wasn't something that held him back. It sparked something inside him. Jason had always been different. He wasn't the strongest cadet in his class. He wasn't the fastest, but he had something that no one could teach: heart. He had grown up hearing stories of humans who faced impossible odds and triumphed. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't even a seasoned soldier, but he believed in something bigger than himself. His hands gripped the edge of the table, his heart pounding. His mind raced with thoughts. Was he ready? Could he really face someone like Vrax? Then something clicked inside him. The room fell silent, the buzz of conversation fading into the background. Jason stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. He didn't care what anyone else thought. He didn't care if he was ready or not. This was his moment, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. I'll do it, Jason said, his voice steady, though his heart hammered in his chest. The room went dead quiet. His fellow cadets stared at him as if he had lost his mind. What? One of them finally whispered. I said I'll do it, Jason repeated, his eyes locking with the others. I'll fight Vrax. A mixture of shock and disbelief spread across the room. The others stared at him, unsure of what to say. Some were speechless, while others couldn't hide their doubt. Jason, you can't be serious, another cadet said, shaking his head. You're a cadet. You've never even seen battle. You're not ready for someone like Vrax." "I don't care," Jason replied, his voice firm. "This is what I've trained for. This is what humanity is about. If we don't stand up to people like Vrax, then what are we even fighting for?" The others exchanged uncertain glances. Finally, Captain Hannah, a senior officer who had been standing quietly at the back of the room, stepped forward. Her face was stern, but there was a hint of respect in her eyes. "Jason," she said, "you're brave, but this isn't just some training mission. Vrax is a living legend. If you want to face him, you need to be ready. And you need to understand the consequences. This is not a game. Do you really want to do this?" Jason looked Captain Hannah in the eyes. His mind was made up. "I'm ready. I have to do this." Captain Hannah nodded slowly. "Then prepare yourself. We'll make sure you have everything you need. But remember, you're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for all of us." The room fell silent again as everyone understood the gravity of Jason's decision. He wasn't just taking on a battle. He was standing up for humanity's very survival. And so, the stage was set. A challenge had been made. The most feared warlord in the galaxy would face a young, untested human cadet. What would happen next was a story that no one could predict. The galaxy was about to see what humans were truly capable of. As the news of Jason's decision spread, it reached the highest levels of command. The War Council convened in an underground bunker, deep beneath the surface of a distant military base. The council room was cold, dimly lit by harsh fluorescent lights, and filled with tension. On one side, high-ranking generals and military advisors sat, their faces grim as they discussed the impossible challenge laid before them. "I can't believe it's come to this," General Preston said, rubbing his temples. "Vrax is a living nightmare. The rumors about his strength aren't just stories. He's crushed entire fleets, destroyed planets. One human cadet can't possibly stand a chance." "It's not just about the challenge," Admiral Carter said, his voice quiet but stern. "Vrax has thrown down the gauntlet for all of humanity. He wants us to know that he is unbeatable. If we let this go unchallenged, it sends a message to the entire galaxy that humans are too weak to stand against anyone. But if we send someone to fight him, and they fail," General Preston warned, "what does that say about us? We can't afford to lose, not to Vrax. The consequences would be disastrous." The conversation grew heated, the room filled with voices debating the implications. But amidst the noise, one voice stood out, calm and steady. "I agree with Jason," Captain Hannah said. She stood at the far end of the table, her arms crossed. Her eyes were fierce with determination. "This isn't about military strategy. It's about who we are as humans. We can't let fear decide our fate. We've always survived because we don't back down. This is our chance to prove it." The other officers turned toward her. Her words held weight, but the council members were still uncertain. A murmur of doubt spread through the room. "Are you saying we send a cadet, someone who has never fought in real combat, to face the galaxy's greatest warrior?" General Preston's voice was sharp. Captain Hannah nodded. "Yes, because it's not about strength alone. It's about the will to survive. Jason is brave enough to face him. He's willing to fight when no one else is." Another officer, Lieutenant Grant, looked uneasy. "But bravery doesn't win battles. Vrax is ruthless. He won't hesitate to destroy him." "Maybe so," Captain Hannah said, "but if we back down now, humanity loses something far worse than a battle. We lose our pride. We lose our will to fight. And once we do that, we might as well surrender to the galaxy's greatest powers." Her words echoed in the room, and slowly, one by one, the officers nodded. There was no more room for hesitation. The decision had to be made. And in the end, it was unanimous. Jason would face Vrax. Captain Hannah turned to the communications officer. "Prepare the broadcast. Let the entire galaxy know that we accept the challenge. We'll send a message loud and clear that humanity will not be intimidated." The officer nodded and began sending the transmission. The message would be broadcast to every corner of the galaxy, reaching every world that humanity had touched. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the base, Jason sat alone in his quarters. His thoughts were a whirlwind of uncertainty and excitement. The decision had been made, and there was no turning back. He had volunteered to face Vrax, but now, the weight of the decision was beginning to sink in. He stared out the small window of his room, looking up at the stars. The night sky seemed so vast, so full of possibilities and dangers. And in the midst of it all, there was only one thing that mattered now: his fight with Vrax. He had trained for years, but nothing could prepare him for this. Vrax wasn't just some enemy. He was a legend, a force of nature. The stories about him were terrifying, and Jason couldn't help but wonder what kind of hell he was about to step into. Could he really do it? Could he defeat the Warlord? Or would he, like so many before him, fall to the overwhelming might of Vrax? Jason clenched his fists. He wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain: he couldn't back down now. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for every human who had ever been underestimated. This was a fight for humanity's place in the galaxy. "Jason," a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Captain Hannah, her silhouette framed in the doorway. "It's time." Jason turned and stood up, his heart racing. This was it. The moment had arrived. He was about to face the Warlord. Captain Hannah's gaze softened. "Are you ready?" Jason nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." Captain Hannah gave him a stern but approving look. "Good. Just remember, it's not about the fight itself. It's about showing the galaxy that humans are more than what they think we are. You can do this." With those words, Jason knew there was no turning back. The challenge had been accepted. The fight would begin soon. Across the galaxy, the message had already spread. The news of the upcoming duel between Jason and Vrax became the talk of every planet, every star system. The galaxy was watching, waiting to see if humanity would live up to the tales of bravery that had been told about them, or if they would be crushed beneath the weight of an empire's strength. The time had come for Jason to prove that even the smallest spark of courage could light up the darkest corners of the universe. The stage was set for a battle like no other. And for Jason, it was more than just a fight. It was a chance to show the galaxy what humanity was truly capable of. The tension in the air was electric. Across the galaxy, eyes were fixed on the small, makeshift arena that had been hastily set up in the barren plains of an uninhabited planet. The conflict was set to begin, and the stakes could not have been higher. All around the galaxy, broadcasts streamed live, with millions of spectators awaiting the first moments of the match between Jason, the human Cadet, and the infamous Warlord Vrax. Jason stood at the edge of the arena, staring down at the dusty, cracked ground beneath his boots. His heart pounded in his chest, and his breath came in quick, nervous bursts. This was no ordinary fight. This was the culmination of everything he had worked for, and everything that humanity stood for. The eyes of the galaxy were on him, and he couldn't afford to falter. A soft wind blew through the area, carrying with it the distant hum of energy shields being activated, the low rumble of machinery preparing for combat. His uniform felt heavier than it ever had before, the weight of expectation bearing down on him. He tried to steady his nerves, to remember all the training he'd endured. He had faced dangerous situations before, but nothing compared to the challenge that lay ahead. On the opposite side of the arena, the ground shook with each heavy step Vrax took. The Warlord was a monstrous figure, towering over his opponents, clad in dark, intimidating armor that shimmered with deadly intent. His reputation alone was enough to strike fear into the hearts of any who faced him. It was said that no one had ever survived a direct confrontation with Vrax, and the rumors about his abilities were terrifying. He was a force of nature, a being of incredible strength, skilled in every form of combat, and virtually unstoppable. But none of that mattered to Jason. He couldn't afford to be intimidated. Not now. He clenched his fists and took a step forward, locking eyes with the Warlord. For a brief moment, everything seemed to go silent, like the entire universe was holding its breath, waiting for the first move. Vrax's voice cut through the stillness, a deep, rumbling sound that reverberated through the air. "Human," he said, his tone mocking yet controlled. "You stand before me, knowing full well the outcome. What makes you think you have a chance?" Jason straightened his back and stared back at the Warlord. "Because I believe in humanity. And we never back down." Vrax smirked. "Very well, Cadet. Let us see if your belief is enough to save you." Without warning, the Warlord lunged forward, his massive form moving with terrifying speed. Jason barely had time to react as Vrax's fist came crashing toward him. Instinct took over, and Jason dropped low, narrowly avoiding the blow. The ground where Vrax's fist had struck exploded into a cloud of dust, sending debris flying into the air. Jason stumbled but regained his footing quickly, his heart racing. He couldn't afford to hesitate. This was his moment. With a sharp breath, Jason sprang into action. His training kicked in, and he darted toward Vrax with surprising agility. The human cadet wasn't the strongest fighter in the galaxy, but his speed and resourcefulness were his greatest strengths. Jason knew he had to outsmart his opponent, not overpower him. As he closed the distance, Jason executed a swift low kick, aiming for Vrax's legs. The Warlord's armor deflected the blow, but it gave Jason the opening he needed. He followed up with a series of quick jabs and punches, each one aimed at weak points in Vrax's armor. The Warlord staggered back slightly, clearly surprised by the ferocity of the human's attack. For a brief moment, Jason saw something in Vrax's eyes, a flicker of doubt, as though the Warlord had never expected such a challenge from someone so small. But that moment of hesitation passed quickly, and Vrax roared in fury, his next blow a powerful swing that sent Jason flying backward. Jason hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind out of him. He gasped for air, struggling to recover. The pain was intense, but he forced himself to stay focused. He had to keep moving. The fight was far from over. Vrax stood tall, looming over him like a mountain. The Warlord's laughter echoed through the arena, deep and menacing. "Is that all you've got, human? You are nothing compared to me." Jason struggled to his feet, wiping the blood from his lip. He could feel the weight of every bruise, every ache, but he refused to let it break him. This was more than just a fight. It was about proving to the galaxy that humans could face the impossible and come out victorious. With a grimace, Jason prepared for the next round. He wouldn't give up. Not now. Not when everything was on the line. Vrax advanced again, his massive fists ready to crush the cadet beneath his might. Jason knew he couldn't keep this up for much longer. He had to find a way to end it. As Vrax closed the gap, Jason's mind raced. He had to think of something unexpected that could turn the tide. And then it hit him. With a swift motion, Jason feigned exhaustion, stumbling as if he were about to collapse. Vrax smirked, sensing victory. The Warlord moved in for the kill. Jason waited until the last moment, then launched himself forward, using every ounce of energy to land a perfect strike on Vrax's exposed side. The Warlord's eyes widened in shock as Jason's punch connected with his armor. The force of the impact sent Vrax staggering back, and for the first time in the fight, he faltered. Jason's heart raced as he pressed his advantage. This was his chance. He wasn't done yet. And now he knew he could win. The dust from the previous exchange hung heavy in the air, swirling around the combatants as they faced each other. Jason's heart pounded fiercely in his chest. His body ached, every movement a reminder of the brutal force Vrax had unleashed upon him. He had never fought a creature like this. Vrax was a force of nature, a being so powerful it seemed impossible that anyone, let alone a human, could stand against him. But Jason had done it. He had made contact, landed a blow that rocked the mighty Warlord. For the first time, he saw a flicker of uncertainty in Vrax's eyes. Jason's mind raced. The Warlord wasn't invincible. He was strong, yes, but he was also reckless. That was the key. Jason had to capitalize on Vrax's arrogance. The Warlord had underestimated him, and now was the perfect opportunity to make him regret it. Vrax's heavy armor gleamed in the dim light of the arena as he took a step back, raising a gloved hand to wipe away the trickle of blood that had started to run from his mouth. His fierce expression never wavered, but there was no mistaking it. Jason had finally wounded him. The Warlord's gaze narrowed, and his voice came out like a growl. "You're more resourceful than I expected, human, but it won't save you." Jason didn't reply. There was no time for words now. The fight had turned, and he could feel the tide shifting in his favor. He wiped the sweat from his brow and positioned himself, focusing all his energy into his legs, preparing for the next move. Vrax let out a thunderous roar, charging forward with the speed of a predator on the hunt. His fists, now glowing with deadly energy, swung toward Jason in a series of rapid strikes. Jason dodged the first blow, feeling the air shift as the punch sailed past his face. He ducked low, narrowly avoiding the second, but the third caught him across the chest, sending him tumbling backward onto the hard ground. Pain shot through his ribs, but he gritted his teeth and quickly rolled to his feet. He couldn't let Vrax gain any more momentum. He had to press the advantage before the Warlord recovered. Jason's mind was racing. He needed a plan, something unexpected, something that would throw off the Warlord's rhythm. Vrax was powerful, yes, but he relied too heavily on brute force. If Jason could use his speed, his agility, he could keep Vrax on the defensive long enough to wear him down. As Vrax charged again, Jason feigned an opening, his stance deliberately slacking, as if he had exhausted all his energy. The Warlord, seeing an opportunity for a clean strike, roared and swung a massive punch aimed directly at Jason's head. It was a mistake. With lightning reflexes, Jason sidestepped at the last moment, causing Vrax to miss wildly. Before the Warlord could react, Jason darted forward, landing a precise kick to Vrax's exposed side, right where he had struck earlier. The impact made Vrax stagger once more, his massive form thrown off balance. This time, however, Jason didn't stop. He was relentless. Jason launched himself back into the fray, his fists flying with a rapid barrage of punches and kicks, targeting Vrax's joints, the points of weakness in the Warlord's armor. He could hear the metal groaning under the pressure of his strikes. The Warlord's armor wasn't indestructible, and Jason knew that with enough pressure, it would crack. Vrax gritted his teeth and raised his arms to block, but Jason was too fast. He kicked once more, this time at the Warlord's knee joint, the blow landing with a sickening crunch. The Warlord howled in pain, stumbling backward, and for a moment, it seemed as if the mighty fighter might fall. Jason knew this was his chance. He had to finish it. But Vrax wasn't done yet. The Warlord's rage erupted like an inferno, and with a savage roar, he swung wildly at Jason. Jason ducked and dodged, using every bit of agility he had learned in his training. But the sheer power behind Vrax's attacks was staggering. Even a glancing blow could shatter bones. Jason's body was already battered, bruised, and sore. He was running on pure adrenaline, but his mind was sharp. He could see the opening now. Vrax was slowing down, his attacks less precise. Jason had worn him down. The Warlord's desperation was clear as he charged once more, too eager to end the fight. Jason took a deep breath, clearing his mind for the final strike. As Vrax approached, Jason stepped aside at the last moment, using his smaller frame to his advantage. Vrax's attack missed, and Jason saw his moment. He rushed forward with everything he had left, launching a powerful uppercut into the Warlord's chin. The force of the blow cracked through the Warlord's helmet, sending him stumbling backward, his huge frame crashing to the ground. Jason stood over him, breathing heavily. His legs felt like lead, and his vision blurred from exhaustion, but he couldn't let up. Vrax was down, but he wasn't out. The entire arena was silent. No one had ever seen the Warlord fall like this, not like this. The galaxy had been watching, and they had just witnessed the impossible. Vrax, gasping for breath, looked up at Jason, his eyes filled with disbelief. How? His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. Jason took a step back, his chest rising and falling with every breath. He looked down at the Warlord, a mixture of exhaustion and determination in his eyes. "Because," Jason said, his voice steady, "humans never give up." The Warlord didn't reply. Instead, he closed his eyes, as if accepting the truth of the moment. As the cheers continued to echo across the arena, Jason's thoughts raced. Victory was a heavy thing, and it wasn't just the weight of the battle that made him feel burdened. It was the realization that this single act of courage had shattered the perceptions of an entire galaxy. What did this victory mean? What did it change? Jason's mind wandered back to the training he had undergone, countless hours spent preparing for this exact moment. But it wasn't just about his skill or strength. It was the human spirit that had carried him through. He had learned, adapted, and evolved in ways that none of the aliens around him could ever anticipate. The battle wasn't won by force alone. It was won because humanity possessed something different, something that couldn't be measured in raw power alone. He looked down at Vrax, who was still lying on the cold metal floor, bruised and battered. The Warlord was a symbol of everything that had oppressed and terrorized the galaxy for years, and yet now, he was reduced to nothing more than a fallen warrior at the feet of a human cadet. Jason had beaten him fair and square, but the victory felt oddly hollow. But it wasn't just about the personal victory. Jason knew that this battle represented something far bigger. The entire galaxy had witnessed this moment, and now the questions would begin. The alliances, the rivalries, and the politics, everything would change. "Are you satisfied, human?" Vrax's voice rasped from the ground. His pride was wounded, but there was something else there, something unexpected. A touch of respect, buried deep beneath his frustration. Jason didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gave a long, hard look at Vrax. He didn't feel the need to gloat. He wasn't interested in proving anything to the Warlord. Jason's victory wasn't about one man's dominance over another. It was about sending a message to the galaxy. "You've underestimated us for far too long," Jason finally replied, his voice steady. "Humans don't back down. We don't stop fighting. And now the galaxy knows." Vrax remained silent for a moment. He had been defeated by an underdog, a seemingly insignificant human cadet. The Warlord had conquered entire planets, decimated civilizations, and faced countless enemies. But never had he faced anything like this, a species that simply refused to quit. The silence between them was thick with tension, a strange respect building in the space where there had once been enmity. Then, without warning, a voice boomed over the intercom, echoing throughout the arena. "The challenge is over. The human has emerged victorious." The crowd erupted once again, but this time, the energy felt different. It wasn't just about the spectacle of combat. It was about the raw realization that humanity had taken its place among the stars. No longer would they be overlooked, underestimated, or disregarded. They had proven their worth, and the galaxy had no choice but to acknowledge it. Jason stood tall, his chest heaving as he absorbed the magnitude of what had just transpired. It was a monumental moment, but it wasn't about basking in glory. It was about recognizing that the battle for humanity's place in the galaxy had only just begun. Suddenly, a voice cut through the noise, one that Jason didn't recognize. "Human," it said, its tone cold and calculating. "The battle may be over, but the war is just beginning." Jason's instincts flared, his body tensing as he scanned the surroundings. His senses were on high alert. He knew the statement wasn't an empty threat. The Warlord's defeat would send ripples through the galaxy, and not everyone would be pleased with the outcome. Jason's heart pounded in his chest. He knew he had to stay sharp. The victory had come with consequences, and in a galaxy full of beings that saw themselves as superior, his triumph would undoubtedly stir the pot. "Who are you?" Jason asked, his voice firm. He wasn't going to let anyone get the upper hand now, not after everything he had been through. The voice came again, now with a hint of amusement. "You'll find out soon enough. This galaxy isn't as forgiving as you think. You may have defeated one warlord, but there are many more to come." The challenge had only just begun. Jason's mind raced. The implications of this statement were clear. There were others who would stop at nothing to ensure humanity didn't rise up. Jason's eyes narrowed as he locked his gaze on Vrax, who was slowly getting to his feet. The warlord had been defeated, but his words were a harbinger of what lay ahead. Despite the uncertainty, Jason stood resolute. The victory may have been a momentary one, but the war was a different story. A galaxy had learned that humanity could stand its ground, and that was something that couldn't be undone. The arena was silent again, but now it was the calm before a storm. "Are you ready?" Vrax asked, his voice low and filled with an eerie sense of finality. Jason's answer was simple, and it echoed through the arena, a statement to the galaxy. "I was born ready." And with that, the true battle for humanity's place in the galaxy had begun. The stakes were higher than ever before. The arena fell into an unnatural silence after Jason's declaration. Even the distant hum of the ventilation system seemed muffled, as if the very air itself was holding its breath. Jason stood, his legs slightly trembling, but his resolve stronger than ever. His heart was still racing from the battle, but his mind was already thinking ahead. His victory against Vrax was not just a personal triumph. It was a message sent to the galaxy. He had defeated one of the most feared warriors in the galaxy, and now the question everyone was asking was, what would humanity do next? Jason's thoughts were interrupted as the sound of heavy footsteps approached. He turned, expecting to see Vrax, but it was not the fallen warlord who approached. Instead, it was an unfamiliar figure, a tall, imposing alien with smooth gray skin, wearing the uniform of a galactic officer. His eyes glinted with an unsettling calmness as he locked eyes with Jason. "Cadet," the alien said, his voice cold but firm. "The galaxy has been watching. You've made your mark, but now you've attracted the attention of more than just the warlords." Jason tensed, sensing the gravity in the officer's words. He had no idea who this alien was, but his presence felt like the calm before a storm. "You may have beaten Vrax, but there are greater forces at play now. You've stirred something in the galaxy that you may not be ready for," the officer continued, his voice almost predatory. Jason's grip tightened around the hilt of his weapon, his mind racing. He wasn't sure if this was a new threat or if the officer was merely trying to intimidate him, but he couldn't let his guard down. He'd already been tested in ways he never expected. But if what the officer said was true, he had just ignited a firestorm in the galaxy. "What do you want?" Jason demanded, his voice steady. He wasn't going to let this alien intimidate him. The officer smirked, seemingly entertained by Jason's boldness. "It's not what I want, human. It's what the galaxy wants. Your actions have consequences. You've proven that humanity is not to be underestimated. That alone makes you a threat." Jason's heart pounded in his chest. The words threat and consequences echoed in his mind. His victory over Vrax had put humanity on the map, but it had also painted a target on his back. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was the symbol of human strength and defiance. And there were those in the galaxy who would stop at nothing to ensure humanity remained beneath their boot. "Tell me who you are," Jason demanded again, his voice tinged with frustration. He was tired of playing games. He needed answers. The officer gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Very well. I am Commander Kale of the Galactic Council, and as of now, you are a part of a much larger game than you realize." Jason's mind whirred. The Galactic Council. He'd heard rumors of them. an organization that governed the galaxy, controlling alliances, trade routes, and the varied balance of power. But their reach extended far beyond anything he could have imagined. "Why come to me?" Jason asked, still trying to understand what was happening. Kel's expression remained unchanged, his face like stone. "Because you've made your move, and now the galaxy must respond. There are forces within the Council who believe your actions will shift the power dynamics. Some see this as a threat. Others see it as an opportunity. But one thing is certain: humanity is no longer just a footnote in the galaxy's history." Jason's pulse quickened. He could feel the weight of Kel's words pressing down on him. The fate of humanity now rested on his shoulders. He had fought to prove that humans could stand tall alongside the galaxy's greatest warriors. But now, the stakes were much higher. There were factions, alliances, and whole systems that would either rise with him or try to crush him beneath their feet. "Where does this go from here?" Jason asked, his voice calm, though his mind raced with possibilities. Kel took a step closer, his gaze never leaving Jason's. "The galaxy will change. But whether it changes for the better, or whether it consumes you in the process, depends on the choices you make from here on out." Jason stood tall, the weight of the galaxy now pressing against him. The victory he had won wasn't the end of the battle, it was just the beginning. He had become the center of a conflict that spanned the stars, and the road ahead was uncertain and perilous. But one thing was clear: humanity had proven that it could stand up to the galaxy's greatest. And now, it would have to prove that it could survive the consequences of its own defiance. Jason took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. He wasn't just fighting for his own survival. He was fighting for the future of humanity, and he would do whatever it took to ensure that humanity's place in the galaxy was secure. The battle for the stars had only just begun, and this time, humanity would not back down. End of Part 7.